Hey guys, real quick before we get into our conversation with Jack Rowe and Ken Mitchell in this episode, after we hit about 125 episodes, I got curious about, what kinds of patterns had actually shown up over and over again across all of the different podcast interviews that I had done. And I wanted to share something with you that I've been working on around that. So I went back through about 80 transcripts and did some analysis, really just looking for where different guests were saying the same things just in their own words. And the result of that week long exercise is something I put together called 10 Lessons from 80 Industry Voices. I also included a word cloud showing the industry terms that came up most often on the show, which was pretty interesting actually to look at. It references a lot of past episodes too, so it can double as a reference if you want to go back and dig into any specific episodes on different topics. So if you want to get a copy, just head to landdevpodcast.com/lessons. That's LANDDEV podcast.com/lessons. And that's lessons plural, LESSONS. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and get into the show. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. We've got a couple familiar faces on the show today. We've got Ken Mitchell and Jack Rowe, both of who were on episode number 85. So I'm not going to give big, long intros for the two of them. If you guys want to learn more about their backgrounds and everything, you can head to episode 85. It was a good one, very well received by our listeners. But I think today, before we jump in with the two of you and get into some of the topics we're going to be digging into, I think just a quick update. Jack, maybe you want to go first. I think the last time we spoke was May, so it's been several months. What have you been up to over the last, I guess, 6 months or so?
In the last 6 months, I've gone out on my own as an entrepreneur, and I've partnered actually with Ken here, trying to expand his footprint as well, with some boots on the ground presence in Texas. So we've been working together for a few months now, which has been really fun, and looking for opportunities to take advantage of the opportunities, I guess, that are coming from this kind of market correction or this hurdle that we're seeing in the home building housing market. So it's been a unique time and interesting, and hopefully we could talk about some specifics during the show.
Yeah. I knew you had some big changes, so I wanted to make sure you're able to talk about that. What about you, Ken? What's been going on in your world?
Well, I've been continuing an acceleration of collaboration. I kind of like that acceleration of collaboration. Uh, as you know, I'm slowly aging out of the business, but stubbornly, I'm having too much fun to totally retire. So I'm really emphasizing more collaboration with guys like Jack. Coincidentally, when Jack and I tied up together, I immediately had a close friend in that had a piece of property in Cleburne, Texas, with a lot of issues, and was seeking some counsel. Well, I would be hesitant to take on an assignment like that being in Colorado. I have a Texas real estate broker's license, but it's exceptionally advantageous to me to have somebody like Jack that can be boots on the ground in Texas. And I find that the collaboration, Jack's in a very big market. I'm in a more of a niche market. Northern Colorado is a good, healthy market, but we probably have 6 or 7 national home builders in our market. Jack's probably got 30 or 40. So
Oh,
it's interesting. I really find that it's challenging and informative to have partners like Jack.
yeah. Well, you said two things there I want to touch on. Number one, if we have any children listening when you said 6, 7, it's going to be one of those things that just makes your mind go crazy. I'm sure you had some adults listening in that smiled a little bit when you said that. But the other thing was you mentioned aging out. I was actually talking to someone yesterday about the industry and whether they felt like we're positioning like are we positioning the next gen are we doing a good job positioning the next generation to kind of take the reins in land development? And I don't know if that is part of the collaboration topic that you brought up, or how do you think we're positioning? Do you think we're doing a good job?
Well, okay, I'm going to take it down to my level because I'm taking responsibility for that. As you know, I did a seminar down in Utah recently and brought together older land people with some younger land people. Rodney Hall was nice enough to provide some scholarships, and we did a seminar on due diligence. And it was a weird one. It was on archaeological due diligence, but it was a huge hit. I mean, everybody. But the amazing part of it was what I call the campfire talks, sitting around until 12 or 1 in the evening and talking about our experiences, and very similar, I think, to, we're the elders of the tribe, and the elders of the way the world gets better is the elders of the tribe reach out to the younger members of the tribe, and they help them. They help them learn how to hunt. They help them, learn how to fish, how to build teepees, how to do, that's really what we're talking about, is a basket of skills and a thought process and a methodology that helps you get through life as a land guy. So I have, as you know, I started working with Gracie Wheel, who just got an award for 40 under 40 being a top prospect for the future. I've had a couple of assignments for Gracie. I've had deals that I couldn't do without people like Gracie. I had a lot sale that I needed to have some entitlement work done, and I really don't. It's not that I don't have the time, but I'm trying to protect my time so I can have more fun. So I broke off the entitlement aspect, gave it to Gracie. She's working with our clients, doing a great job. I'm doing similar collaborations with people that are kind of mid-level. Sean Flannery, Heidi Majerick is working on a co-housing project with me that I could not do on my own. She's working on the entitlement side. I'm working on the brokerage side. Um, Victoria Fitch, who is now off on her own. I've been giving her some counseling on how to start up your own business. Um, she's helping me find investors for a multifamily site that I'm representing. So, every day I find that there's more and more and more people um, that I can help that can help me. And the hidden treasure there is how fulfilling it is, and also how much it grows my potential, because young people are in the middle of a wave of technology that's sometimes hard for an older guy like myself to understand. They're the pathway for me to understand the concepts. So, Jack, what are your thoughts on that?
Uh, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Texas A&M Master Plan Develop and Property Development Program. So you have folks like you, Ken, who are making it a mission to pass on your knowledge as a legacy uh, to the next generation, which is invaluable because this is not a formulaic business. There's kind of similar things you do, but it's very much there's so many variables, so everything's different. Anecdotal kind of learning, I think, is to me really valuable, and I even got some of that at A&M because the professors are from practice, right? But once you leave school, you have to keep learning. I prefer to learn above and beyond what my current um, job provided for me, and so people like you, Ken, are definitely important, and I think part of the equation. And then you have the institutional things like the schools and um, programs that give that formal education to give people like myself kind of entree into joining the ranks of this profession. And but and then of course you have podcasts, right, like this. So I mean, I'm starting to see more interest in land development and policy and all these things in the general public, which I think is really hopeful because obviously it's such an important factor in our life. We're building our cities that we occupy, right? So the more interested people there are, um, even just people in other careers and who are occupying this space and maybe have recognized things that could be improved. I think it's an exciting time, and so I think we are doing a good job, and we could. That doesn't mean that we don't try to do a better job still and continue to give back. And
I've got a good example of, I think, kind of what Ryan was talking about. I have a kind of a luxury self-storage concept. It's kind of a hyper man cave project that I've been working on, and I have a buyer who's in the real estate business. She does property management. She does a lot of investing in single family homes. She really wants to build these units, but she doesn't have the skills and abilities. So I'm brokering that deal with her for a client. But she said, as a part of the deal, she said, I really want to, I don't know how to develop this property. I want you to help me. And I said, well, I don't have the time to help you like myself entirely. I can coach you. And so I'm bringing together a team of collaborators that can help her get to the goal line. And every single person that I talked to on this team, I said, Lauren wants to learn. So you can't, she's not going to be a client of yours unless you agree in advance that you're going to let her, um, not in a demeaning way, but you're going to have to be willing to take the extra time and explain to her the process and explain to her why the sewer lines are going here or why the water lines are going here. So I'm looking for my most compassionate, patient consultants to put together with her. And again, uh, I can't stress the collaboration because the collaboration is everything. I would not be able to have an active retirement if I didn't have a huge pool of collaborators surrounding me so that I can operate with a lot of deal opportunities at a higher level and not have to touch the nitty gritty so much, but it's the nitty gritty that teaches. It's the nitty gritty that challenges. It's the nitty gritty where people learn how to move from problem to problem to problem, take their pick and shovel and bury those problems. So I think the other thing I want to say about the whole the whole process of where I am, because I would characterize Jack as mid stage career. I'm late stage. When you're late stage, you worry about a lot of different things. I worry about different things than Jack does. I worry about keeping my mind active. I'm surrounded by people in my age group who are starting to experience mental decline. And I would attribute it, when I look at the ones that have the greatest mental decline, they're checked out. They're worried about their golf score. They're worried about the next series on Netflix. They're not challenging the brain. And the thing that I feel like differentiates me from a lot of other old guys, because I make no bones about it, I'm an old guy. You at some point you have to make peace with the fact and identify that you're an old guy. I try to be I try to be the most vital old guy that I possibly can. Um, but I would not dream of ever just totally checking out because I'm building a protective net around my brain by constantly stimulating myself with super hard challenges and working with super intelligent younger people. And I can't stress that enough. There's very few people my age that are adding to me right now. It's the people like Jack that add to me and challenge me and teach me.
well, it's mutual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's just, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was going to say, like, there's a couple things that I was thinking about when both of you were explaining that. So, one of them is when I think about the current, like, this next generation coming into the labor force and everything, and I see this with my own kids. Like, we have an issue and a challenge with instant gratification
Yes.
and getting getting results really quickly. Some of these land development projects, they're not quick, and it's hard for it's hard for some of the youth to stay focused. And so I worry about what that's going to look like coming into the industry. And what I'm seeing a lot of right now, and it might just be the pocket of advertising and stuff that I'm seeing, is that there's a ton of land flipping courses, because what they're selling is the instant gratification
Yeah.
of, you can go out and flip this in 30 days. Like, go get this, flip it in 30 days, make 15 grand, move on to the next property, flip it. And so we don't have it's really the get rich quick concept that's been around forever. That's nothing new. It's just now being done. Land is sexy, and so they're able to sell that. So it's just something I think about, and I wonder what that next generation is going to do. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people that are going to not fall into that pattern and will step up and be these that next gen that takes the reins and does take over. But anyway, it's just something I was thinking about as you guys were talking.
Yeah, I'm before you even started saying that, I feel like I often have like a moralizing tone when I'm talking on things like this, because it is gross to me to think of using land as a get rich quick tool. I get that, in some cases it might be that. For some other people, it's a get bankrupt quick tool. So, those people don't go advertising on podcasts how they lost all their money, right?
Right.
But and we touched on this last time, right? As long as the end result ends up adding, it's kind of what Ken was saying earlier about like his demographic, right? He wants people that are attributing an addition, right? There's give and take in relationship. This land flipping model is an extractive model. It is not, there's not even any pretending about, well, sometimes they pretend, but contributing and creating value, right? If there's a value creation, whether that's entitlements or whatnot, or you're moving inventory and adding to supply, you can argue that there's some value there, right? But um, as I just really hope people see the importance of what they're doing. Even if they're here first to make money, I hope that they can learn that the legacy of their labor lasts for generations. And so maybe uh, some ideas about legacy can crop up in their minds as they're doing this stuff. But uh, there's this huge surge of anything about land, which frankly was non-existent as far as I know 5-10 years ago. So there is a positive. I regret that it's framed as just a way to like house flipping, because it's so important, not just because me and Kim do it, but we all occupy something that someone like us developed. Every single person in the country, in the world, right? So um yeah, I mean, I hope that they listen to this and start getting interested in design and um policy, quality of life, well-being. And there's so much to learn, which is, I'm sure that's why Ken's still here, because it keeps you sharp, because there's always something new to incorporate. Uh, so I hope that everybody gets that bug of wanting to learn more and grow their skill set and their knowledge base.
So Ryan, I'm going to come at this from a different angle. It's not just the young people. I found the other day that I was having a very difficult time getting through a book, an actual hard book. And what I discovered is that I would read a couple of pages and then I would have to set it down. And it's because my phone, my business,
Mm.
everything around me is training my brain for these quick fixes, for these quick gratification, just like you said, instant gratification. And over the last several months, I've been retraining. I'm setting my phone aside at night and I'm picking up hard physical books. And I'm proud to say I read 3 books in the last 3 weeks. And it's like I'm having the most amazing experience retraining my brain. And it can happen. But I want to also, I don't think every young person is moving in that direction. One of the reasons that I started using Gracie Wheel, who's probably, she's under 30, I guess. Gracie has this razor sharp focus and attention, and I have ADD. And so collaborating with her, she's constantly calling me and telling me, oh, well, here's your assignment and you need to do this and you have by Wednesday. And so there are still some young people out there that have that superpower, because I consider focus to be a superpower. Uh, I want to make one comment about the flipping, because I think every dog has his day, karma's a bitch, the whole 9 yards. I I had a interesting experience early on in my career where I was working for someone that was doing flips, and we were adding a little value. And after a time, we were doing gas station deals, assembling them, getting them approved by, in this case, Chevron. And then we would flip the property to someone that would buy the package. So I decided I was going to do one of those. And I tied up a piece of, very good corner in Dallas, Fort Worth. I found a client uh, that was interested in getting a site fully approved with financing in place. And I was just so obsessed with how much money I was going to make. I had like 10 or 15,000 in earnest money. I was going to flip it for like $100,000. And, 30 years ago, $100,000 was a lot of money. So I was just to the point where I had to go firm and he had to go firm. And I wisely had him going firm 5 days before I had to go firm. Uh, and he called me. He said, I just got back from Mecca. He was in Mecca, making his pilgrimage. And he said, I've just totally restructured my life. And this is not what I want to do anymore. So it's like, it's kind of a house of cards. The flips can collapse very easily. And if you're the last guy holding the bag and you purchase something and then all of a sudden the market's gone and you haven't built value, as Jack said, you haven't really added any value, you're liable, instead of being in a property for $100,000, you're likely to now be in a property for $40,000. And not a lot of the people that are doing flips have the staying power to absorb the losses that occur when the market goes down. It's great when the market's rising and the market has got a lot of strength, but when it doesn't, you better have a lot of money, because you're going to have to cover land. Land loses value faster than any other asset class in real estate. And I want everybody to remember that. If I was a teacher, I'd say, kids, I want you to remember that, because land doesn't have an income stream. When it goes bad, it's not giving you a monthly revenue like a retail center, like a house that you're renting, like a lot of other things. All land does is sit there and stare at you, and it wants to be mowed and it wants you to pay property taxes, and if you borrowed against the land, now you're making easy monthly payments or quarterly payments on something that you have negative equity in, and you're having to make the decision every day, am I going to stop the bleeding and just give it back? Well, now you got a stain. Now you give a piece of property back to a bank. Good luck trying to ever borrow again, because banks remember the guys that go under and give property back. So if you want to keep your reputation intact, you're going to have to work through every problem. So, again, karma has a way over the course of a career of catching up to you. Most of the good work that I try and do is because I have a fear of karma. My karma's really good right now, and I think it's because I earned it. Jack?
Well, I want to ask you about that. Is that something that just has to do with how you frame your mind going into projects? Like you're thinking about it a different way? Like, and let me explain. So, are you going into projects thinking about the value that you're creating for the community or for whoever you're doing the project for versus, this other thing you're talking about where you're just going into it and you don't really care. You're just trying to make a buck on the
I,
project. Do you think that's where the good
I'm
karma
an
comes from?
outlier because first of all, I'm client focused and I work as hard. I've got a $200,000 lot sale, and I'm working as hard on that $200,000 lot sale as a $6 million dirt sale that I have working right now. So I think, first of all, my hierarchy is, first of all, do the best for every client that you have. Treat them well. Be serious. The second thing, to me, most important, is you have got to corner risk. You've got to chase down every single piece of risk with the property, and you've got to push it into a corner, and you have to hammer on it and hammer on it until the risk gets from this to this. You can't ever take all the risk out of a deal. But what I try and look at on every deal that I do is what's the exit strategy? What if you can't get this done? What if you, because if there's multiple outcomes for every piece of property. You know, the ultimate outcome is if you buy something and you can't find somebody else with dirt, if you buy something and you just can't find anybody else that's going to want your dirt, the only way to squeeze value out is to develop it and build on it. And so I always look at what is my exit value if I'm forced to do that? How much money is it going to take? How much equity to borrow to put a structure on the land? And then at the end, what's the income stream going to be? So in essence, you're forcing the land to give you an income stream by taking it all the way through the process, which you would prefer not to do. So I think that's the second thing. The third thing, obviously, is what I try and teach is really, really a deep dive on due diligence and looking under every single rock and then looking again and then looking again and then looking again. Uh, so that is the thing. Those are really three of the things that I try and focus on. You know, honestly, and I'm in a different stage in my career. I've already banked my retirement, so to speak. The monetary side of it is fun, but it's more of a scorecard. It's like, okay, I did relatively well, but I'm more interested in a lot of the projects I do now. I bring in collaborators and I pay them early and I pay them fast for their work because I can. I know that they need it because their cash flow is not as good as someone that's longer along in their career. But I want to make one other comment about that. If you're looking at a land career and doing like what Jack is now doing with me, 60% of the things that I'm working on now, there's not a payday for a minimum of 12 to 14 months. So you got to have staying power. So don't get into land unless you have a trust fund or alternative source of income because you have to have staying power because the deals take so long, sometimes 2 years, and every deal I'm looking at now could fail. We could go a year or two, and maybe we don't get the entitlements, or most of my clients are making the bet that things are going to be better a year from now than they are today. Most of the deals I'm working on now are entitlements to sell for a higher price in a year. Because if you're trying to sell something based on market conditions right now, it's pretty hopeless. So most of my sellers have bought into the bet that they give the buyer enough time to have a fully developed, fully entitled site with engineering, shovel ready, and they're getting anywhere from a 20% to 100% markup by being liberal with time and allowing the buyer to bring things to shovel ready. Now, the danger is that if things don't improve, people are going to drop those deals. But at the same time, and I'll give you one example, we have a deal we're doing right now where the buyer is putting over $250,000 into entitlement. If that buyer goes away in a year, we're going to have a project that's way further along and way closer to being shovel ready. So what else could you do over the course of a year that would have more value than having an intelligent buyer putting his money on your dirt? And I think that's important for sellers right now to recognize. You've got to be flexible and you've got to be willing to hold because your return is going to be much higher. Jack, I'm sure you're probably going to agree with that because I'm sure that's the way you're trying to structure deals right now.
Yeah, well, and I might share something for potential sellers that that they can use, right? And because I was talking to somebody recently. Um, if anybody doesn't know, there is deals being dropped, right? Even in markets like Dallas Fort Worth, deals that have been tied up for a year sometimes. Typically, they're not good enough, or for whatever reason, um, they didn't make it through the feasibility period, right? And one of the selling points that I've made in some cases that was helpful for me and getting a contract is it's like, hey, look, like right now you have a piece of land, you know about this much about it. You give it to me, right? And we'll write into the contract that whatever reports and findings that we discover through due diligence, we will, if we don't buy it, we will give it to you, right? And so now you'll know this much, right? You'll know way more about your land. You'll be more informed and educated if we fall through, right? So at least they get something back. Well, this colleague I was talking to last week mentioned that they had a deal. This broker actually, he had a deal that was dropped by the buyer. He was representing the seller. Same scenario. Well, they just didn't send any reports, and their excuse or justification was, oh well, we actually our consultants were working on kind of like a promise for future work if we are able to close. So we actually didn't pay for any of the reports or engineering or studies we got. And so we don't own that intellectual property. So we cannot give it to you. We're sorry. Right. And so that's kind of what I would call shady business. Right. And so unfortunately, I'm sharing it now. Right. But those sort of anecdotes do get shared around, and it undermines the ability for a better party to a transaction to make that promise and hold it up, because you're saying, well, actually they somebody wriggled out of that last time. And so it's important to do what you say, and they don't have to share that with their next client, right? But it's just a way to kind of add value to the deal in a uncertain time, like Ken said, right? It's like, we're going to try to add value. If we end up not being able to buy it, here's some of that intellectual property value that we paid for during the past however many months. um, and a seller should be happy to receive that, right?
Yeah, I want to make a quick comment on that because I've got two listings right now where the former broker, one of whom was a residential broker, who really, in my view, professionally should not have taken the land listing because she didn't have the expertise. But both of the listings were under contract 3 times before they arrived on my desk and failed. And I asked the owners, I said, well, give me the due diligence documents so that I can study your property. And they're like, well, we don't have any. Why don't you have any? And it was obvious that there was hundreds of thousands of dollars of due diligence, but the, the broker representing the seller didn't put in the contract that they had to give them all of the due diligence work. In fact, one of them was written the opposite. It said, we will give you all of our due diligence work after we close, and only if we close. So what value is having the due diligence if they buy the property? Who cares? It should be the inverse in every case. Everything, if you're giving someone time to study a property before they close, and you're giving them more than an ordinary amount of time, there's got to be something to even the scale. And to me, to even the scale is I've got another property that failed. I seem to see these a lot. Um, I've probably got in my files, in my Dropbox files, I've got $200,000 worth of due diligence that wisely the brokers did require the buyers to turn over. So that's not a listing. I'm helping the owner now kind of figure out what to do next. But he's got a huge leg up because when people say, well, I need 90 days due diligence because it takes a long time to get a soils report, my response is, hey, I've got 3 soils reports. Here, I'll give them to you. You're going to get 60 days due diligence. It makes you a more powerful negotiator on behalf of your client if you've got all these due diligence documents. So to me, it starts with the contract, and it starts with how you shape your contract. And part of the things that I try and do for younger people that I work with is send me your contract. Let me look at your contract. And we go over the contract and we look at all the things that are seller positive and all the things that are seller negative. And that's the kind of thing where I feel like I can really add value with not a lot of time and effort because I'm used to seeing it, I'm used to looking at it, and I've lived it.
Do you think that, people who are listening in that may be early in their career, do you think it's beneficial for them to go work for, larger organizations where they can be a part of deals? Or do you think that the concept of collaborating with more of like freelance people or smaller groups would provide more value to them? Does that make sense? Like how does somebody collaborate basically?
It 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 does. Uh, I'm going to say something that probably going to make me either very popular or not popular with Rodney Hall.
Uh-oh.
You can edit this out if you need to.
Yeah, if you need to. I was giving some advice to someone the other day that I was actually paid to mentor. The company actually paid me to mentor this young man, and he was having a lot of struggles with his company. And I said, dude, you got to leave. You've got to leave. You're not going to grow until you leave. You've got to get a more diverse experience. You've got the experience of working for one builder who does one type of product that stays in a bandwidth of about 200 homes a year. You need to branch out. Um, Part of the reason that I'm comfortable financially, but I could be at least probably 5x more comfortable. But there were times in my career when somebody said, well, Ken, I want you to build a retail center. And I did it. And it didn't make sense financially. I probably should have focused on brokerage, but I thought, wow, I'd really like to build a retail center. That's going to give me knowledge and experience on the commercial side. And are when times are slow, I can do literally anything. I'm doing a demolition permit right now for a client. I'm studying how to bring uh, a fire system absent having water supply. I'm working on with fire consultants on a warehouse building. I am doing the weirdest, wildest, just number of different things that I'm doing, and it's because over time, every time I had the opportunity to make a choice between dollars and knowledge, I always chose knowledge. And in the short term, it seemed like a very dumb decision, but in the long term, it gave me staying power. And like last year, I did two commercial deals. I sold an office building and I sold a retail building. I would have never had the skills as a residential land guy for National Home Builders had I not branched out and worked for several years for Herb Weitzman in Dallas, who was a leading commercial broker. I got extra skills. So I think you have to push yourself to be as diverse early on as you possibly can. And if you get a chance to go somewhere and learn something new, just go do it. Because when I look at people that have been in the same company for 20 years, they're not as valuable to me because they've done the same thing for 20 years. And they're really not in a disparaging way, but they're a one trick pony. I can only task them to do that one thing and to solve problems related to that one thing. So, and Jack is seeing that now. I think he's going to see it way more in the years ahead. He's building value because he's stretching.
Adding to what Ken is saying, to me, it's like a question of depth versus breadth, right? It's like if you work like the route I took was to work with the top four largest builders. That's how my career played out as an employee, right? What that gave me was a unique opportunity to have tremendously more volume of experience per skill, right? So if I'm managing projects and one builder's does one or two projects a year, a couple communities, and I'm doing 6 to 10 at any given time, I'm getting decades of experience over the course of 5 years relative to this person, right? So I have this, like the breadth, right? I have, okay, project management. How can I manage civil construction? Now the depth is, okay, I'm doing 30 iterations of that and seeing all the variations that make me valuable because I can avoid this mistake or prevent this from happening. And then, okay, I want to know about how entitlements work and how that informs this. So I did that because everything is connected, right? There's planning and execution, underwriting. So my goal was to wear as many, if not all, the hats that I could, and I did that over nearly a decade before going out on my own. Um, so I had friends who worked with smaller volume builders who right out of the gate got more breadth of experience with that one employer because they had fewer people and each person had to do more things but less times. And so those are the considerations I recommend thinking about.
So Ryan, I got a quick, just, I think I could tell, again, I always apologize for telling stories, but um, when I was in Dallas, I got most of my commercial experience working. I hung my license with Herb Weitzman, who is like number one, number two commercial broker in Dallas for many, many, many years, probably still is. And after a couple of months, I got an award for one of the top producers after I was a rookie and I just started there. And I remember Herb came into my office one day and he said, Ken, I was at the same time I was doing land development work for a client. I was developing a subdivision in Las Colinas. And Herb came to me and he said, Ken, you can make a lot more money if you just give up this other stuff you're doing and just focus on being a commercial broker. You've got serious potential. And he said, you're always coming in the office and you're wearing Levi's and boots. He said, if you're going to work with me, you need to wear a suit every day. And that's when I left Herb because because there's nobody that's going to tell me to wear a suit every day because it involves, if you're doing what I do, I might change clothes 3 or 4 times a day. If I'm out in the field, I got my grubby, dirty clothes on, my hiking boots. If I'm going to see a banker, we don't wear suits in Colorado, but we sometimes put on coats. I don't think I've worn a tie in 15 years, but what he was saying was exactly true. Herb was exactly right. I could have made a ton of money just staying with Herb. He offered such a great environment and he taught me so much. The group of people I was with, they taught me so much. But I wanted to be out in the field. I wanted to be managing the dirt. I wanted to get that experience. When I came to Colorado and I thought, well, I probably going to have to retire because nobody's going to want to hire an old guy and I'll just retire. The first opportunity that I had, a client asked me to develop 500 lots in Berthoud, Colorado. 500 lots. And he said, I need for you to do this for me, and you're the only guy I trust to do it. I would never have had or maintained that experience had I not told Herb no. So I'm 60 years old. I'm relocating to a new market. I'm trying to figure, am I going to go just work at REI and sell sporting goods? What am I going to do? Now I'm developing again because you know what? There were 30 things that I could do. There wasn't just one thing. And somebody found a skill that I had. In Colorado, there's not a lot of people that have done development work on the scale that I have because it's a smaller market. In smaller markets, when you move there, you have the kind of skills that very few other people have because small markets, you might do 1 or 2 deals a year, development deals, in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Florida, we might do 20 or 30 or 40. So it was very advantageous. So uh, it's kind of a good story. I would beware of any, I think Thoreau said it best. I don't know if you're a fan of Walden. Jack probably has read Walden, but Henry David Thoreau said, beware of any enterprise that requires new clothes. I always think about that when I think about Herb wanting me to wear a suit to work every day. Not going to happen.
Wise
Anyway,
advice. So what do you guys have going on in 2026? What's next year look like for you guys?
I can start. One of my first contracts I'm working on now is this. I don't know how much I could share, so I'll try to be vague and detailed at the same time. But it's really interesting, kind of like mixed use, missing middle housing rental community. That's an infill deal that I'm working on behalf of a client right now, and it's really exciting. I love the architect and land planning group that's working on it, and I get to collaborate with them, right? And it's to me in a market where a lot of the commoditized product, is having trouble being sold. the safest thing is to differentiate, right? It's that blue ocean strategy, right? Sometimes we can forget because often there's a lot of financially oriented people in this business making decisions. This is a physical thing we're making. How it looks and feels matters. That's what it is, right? So if I can focus more on how much value can I add to the neighborhood, to the future occupants, to the greater city and community with architectural elements, site planning, connectivity, and businesses, right? And so these infill deals, which is something that's not, it's technically greenfield, I guess, right? But if there's some 5-10 acre pocket of land that's surrounded by developed buildings that's still there for whatever reason, there's might be a reason it's still there, uh, but it could be that that reason is just the person didn't want to sell it until now, right? And so what they offer is one, your likelihood of having walkability, which I hope we have enough time to get into before we close today. But walkability requires things to walk to that are interesting, whether that's a cafe, a restaurant, uh, your bank, uh, a store, right? Something of interest that people would drive to typically. Walkability is the ability to walk there, right? And so these infill communities, um, for one, they have proximity to other land uses by the very nature of them being kind of the last to the game, right? All that other stuff's already been developed. And kind of suburban, exurban development, the houses come first and the stuff to walk to comes later, if ever. And so it's really great to focus on these for now. And then what's the value you're adding? The city gets tax revenue on this non-producing asset for them, right? So the city has more money to spend on maintaining infrastructure and providing police and emergency services. The owner has the legacy of having their land developed into something to be enjoyed by their neighbors and friends and community, right? If they do a tasteful job. And because it's the hole in the donut, if you've heard that, right? There's already action everywhere. That stuff is going to be way easier to sell. For one, you have traffic. People are driving by every day. Hey, someone's finally building on that piece of land. What's going to be there? There's so many eyes on it. Um, so I'm working on something like that now. That's very exciting. As far as 2026 goes, if we can get entitlements on this, I imagine that it will be closed on and built out. And so I'm hopeful that I might have a shot at winning a contract to manage the development, the horizontal construction of that community. But that lies on getting the zoning and architectural um, needs that we have to get to that closing table.
Next year, you know, it's it's probably hard for a lot of people to understand, but I next year is kind of a pivotal year for me because I turned 73. And when you turn 73, the federal government says all of your IRAs, you've got to start taking them. So I've been just banking my IRAs and then continuing to invest. I haven't been drawing down anything because I keep, I generate enough revenue to pay the rent, to feed myself. But next year, the government, if I had $100, the government says in my IRA, the government says, well, Ken, you're going to live another 20 years according to our actuarial table. So you got to take out $5 a year and then you got to pay taxes on it. That puts you in a situation where all of a sudden you've got this revenue coming in that you're being taxed on. Um, and so every marginal dollar you make after Social Security and after forced IRA withdrawals, every marginal dollar puts you in a higher tax bracket. So my focus next year is first of all collaborating more, creating income streams for other young professionals, mid-stage professionals, helping them grow and develop and build their income stream because I don't have to have it. It's fun to have it. Um, So that's number one, I think, is that number. Well, actually, that's number two. Number one is, you see the dog picture behind you. My dog died this last year and it was sad, but it opens up for me to do a lot more adventure travel. So I've got 8 to 10 really cool outdoor trips that I'm working on that I'm curating. So you're going to see me in a lot of remote locations, getting in a lot of trouble next year. So that's number one. Number two is the collaboration. Number three, uh, I took on an assignment for the Southern Plains Land Trust. They have a 50,000 acre tract in southern Colorado. They want to recreate the shortgrass prairie that was here when the pioneers were here. And so they've got like a starter herd of about 150 buffalo. They've got black-footed ferrets. They've got a lot of endangered species. They've asked me to help them figure out how to create an American Serengeti on this land where people would actually travel to this site and experience this opportunity. Well, these are biologists, they're scientists, they're fundraisers. They don't know anything about development. So I'm bringing together a team to figure out what that looks like. Do we have a safari experience? Do we have, tiny houses that they stay in while they're here? What does the experience look like? I'm super excited about that. And I've got a lot of colleagues that are working on that with me. But, imagine, Jack, for a land guy to have 50,000 acres of land to play with, that's like 70 square miles. And, but managing it for something totally different. How do I bring people close to a herd of buffalo without where it's a really novel and unique experience, but we don't kill them because buffalo are very dangerous. How do we bring them in close contact with endangered species so that they can appreciate and learn about them but not jeopardize their existence because of the intrusion of the human element. So that's going to take my background in the natural sciences. I've got a master's degree in forestry, working with really, really cool people and a nonprofit to help giving back because anytime you protect land, you're giving back. We I hate to use the word destroy. We use up a lot of land in our business, and my underlying ethic is we have to also work equally hard to preserve wild places and preserve places for nature and for the animals that deserve a place coexisting with us. So, uh, that's it for me. I'm super excited about next year. I always am, but for most people, they might say, "Well, oh my God, poor Kenny's going to be 73." Every year that I get older is the most exciting year I've ever had. I know someday that's going to change, but I want people to realize that growing old is not a penalty. It could be a blessing, and it could be one of the most entertaining and enriching parts of your life. So that's my final thought.
Well, Jack, you had mentioned walkability. On the walkability side of things, something I see you comment on LinkedIn from time to time is challenging people on what they think walkability actually is. Because you'll see a lot of people say we made this walkable development, and then you'll look at the schematics of it and everything, and you're like, that's not walkable. That's not what walkable is. That's not what that means. So can you give us a definition? What is walkability?
Yeah, and I'm not trying to troll people, but to me, LinkedIn is the public forum. That's where ideas are shared, and if I see something to me that is important, that is uh, portrayed wrong, I feel compelled to correct it because I don't know how many people are going to read that and regurgitate that. And so to me, it's a counterpoint. Uh, Walkability is not trails, it's not sidewalks. I could end there, right? But what you see online is, we built these beautiful trails, or our community has 10 miles of trails. That's wonderful. That's an exercise amenity. That's not walkability, right? Walkability specifically speaks to the ability to walk to places of interest. If you've heard of ideas like the 5-minute city or the 10-minute city, what that means to is that I can get to all of my daily needs, bank, not doctors, not really daily, right? But say my bank, my grocery store, the coffee shop, restaurants, um, places like that, right, that we frequent in daily life. That 5-10 minute city concept refers to the ability to walk from my front door to that place. That's and we don't need an academic to come define this for us. We can, with our reason and our mind, work backwards to figure out what are we talking about here and why is it valuable. Does anybody think it's valuable that they can walk down their street for 2 miles and get nowhere? No, we all have that ability. Wherever you are, you don't need a sidewalk unless you have a disability. And in the US, we have ADA laws, right? So most people can get out and walk for the sake of walking anywhere. Clearly, that's not what we're talking about. Walkability is, man, I really wish I could take my daughter and walk and go get a cup of coffee in the morning, but I can't. I have to drive 15 minutes. Oh, I wish I could just run to the grocery store and pick up a bottle of milk. Oh, but I can't. It's those things and the enjoyment and, it's people watching opportunities, right? Why do people love to go to Manhattan? Why do people love to go to Paris and London and Barcelona? Because there's hundreds of thousands of people walking around and it's interesting. And there's a bunch of stores and things to do everywhere you go. It's a sensorially rich environment. So I just want to put that out there because it is a hot topic of conversation and people want walkability. Places with walkability are valued 20% more by consumers, whatever. If we take that soundbite and then go develop stuff with trails and think it's walkability, you're making a bad investment because that's not what the customer's talking about. And so I'm trying to create a conversation around that distinction that um, it's somewhere to walk to. And so by definition, that means it doesn't have to be a mixed use development. But if I'm building housing here, it's really nice to have a cafe here and a grocery store here. We know that because grocery stores are a huge amenity to housing communities, right? So uh, it's like we know it, but then we forget it when we're talking about walking trails somehow. So it's that proximity. So where are opportunities for that today? It's going to be infill infill projects typically, right? And if it's a new community, it's the forward thinking to be like, hey, could I reserve one lot within this community to be a cafe in 20 years or whenever if there's some volunteer who wants to take that on? Or how can I program it and leave some commercial lots to add something to walk to for these people when there's enough rooftops for a commercial developer to come in and do that? And so uh, I could probably ramble for another 20 minutes, but I think I got
Yeah.
my point across is that it's the proximity of different uses and the ability to get to those places on foot. Is that's what walkability is really about.
Jack, I'm going to just make one comment because I've seen some developers here do this, like McQuinney. Instead of building, and they do build nice trails and everything else, but instead of putting a lot of money into concrete, they put some of the development budget into a little small nucleus neighborhood restaurant and a couple, like maybe a place for a coffee shop. And when you drive into the neighborhood, it just feels better. It just feels better to have a little, even if it's a micro commercial development. It doesn't have to be a lot, and you might have to underwrite that to start and help maybe give some really advantageous rent. But the vitality that it brings to the community, I think, is worth the investment. And I see the smart master plan guys like McQuinney here. They do that, and it really feels good. I'd like to the next time I do something of that scale, I'd like to take a page from their music and look at doing that as well.
Is the issue with this that there's a lot of zoning restrictions for doing this type of project with trying to make
Well, I want to answer that for Fort Collins because in Fort Collins, they absolutely desperately want us to do it. They write the zoning districts to encourage that type of activity. But the problem is that I ended up doing one or two projects here where they forced the developer to put a small retail center in, and nobody wanted to buy it because there wasn't the energy to get somebody to risk the dollars. So I think the cities love that concept, but it's hard for the developers to do because they're expecting a return on that retail center. And I think you have to view that as an amenity that is built into your budget. And you've got to accept a little bit of negative cash flow, maybe even build it yourself and lease it at sub-market rates for a little while you have the buildup. Because it's hard to do. It's because almost every retailer wants to have a huge trade base. And a lot of these communities, the infill, not so much. But if you're not infill, it's difficult to have enough critical mass to have a business.
Right. And then, I'm going to try to say a couple ideas here. So, for one, zoning, that's what it is for, actually, is to separate uses in space.
Mhm.
So, absolutely, it does that. We could go talk on another episode for 3 hours about zoning. I don't want to get started on that. It means, well, it needs to be updated depending on the life stage of whatever city you're talking about. For instance, Dallas is still in a suburban zoning situation, despite being not nothing. We're not a suburb, right? Dallas proper, and so that needs an update. But I want to talk about. I have seen, when I was in A&M in grad school, they built some kind of mid-rise, maybe 4 or 5 story apartment complexes near campus on a busy area, and they forced them to put mixed use kind of office retail ground floor. Half of it today, 10 years later, is still vacant, probably, right? It's been a couple months since I've been back, but it didn't fill up. And so what you see is this idealistic forcing of what you want. um, I mentioned earlier, commercial follows rooftops. Ken saying they follow liveliness or activity. There has to be a lot of people somewhere for a commercial enterprise to go in and expect to be successful. And if they're not successful, they go out of business, and that's no good for anybody.
To play on that, Jack, the hack for that may be smaller retail spaces. Our typical retail space is 1,200 square feet. It's 20 by 60.
Right.
So maybe in these small communities and you're looking for a nucleus, maybe you do a 300 square foot coffee shop because
Right.
then your overhead is not so great. Your electricity, your rent, everything else. So maybe you've got 4 or 5 retail spaces for micro retailers. I think it's just it's a creativity issue. You look at so many inline retail centers. It's 20 by 60. It's 20. It's 40 by 60. So you're because it's convenient for us as developers to think that way. You're forcing everybody to rent 1,200 square feet, and renting 1,200 square feet is probably not a success formula for a little coffee shop at the entrance to a community.
And that can change, right? They
Yeah,
can become successful at the
yeah,
scale they can manage today and then
yeah,
grow into that. But
yeah,
not if they fail because they weren't set up.
yes.
So I want everybody, if you're listening and interested in this, Google Monty Anderson, Monty, Monty Anderson. He's kind of a celebrity in the CNU or small developer world because he is very principles and values driven and does great things for his community. And that's his focus. 2015, they started this thing called the Small Developers Boot Camp, which is now called the Incremental Development Alliance. That I happened to be a guest at that first event in Duncanville, which is a suburb of Dallas to the south. And that's his first case study. That's where he's from. He stayed there, didn't like people moving away. And so he tried to revitalize it as a developer. And one of his tactics that he started with was a pop-up tent market on Main Street, to where, in collaboration with the city staff and officials, he said, "Okay, we're going to set up basically like you see at a sports event. What do you call them? Just a cut like a shade cover, right? 6 feet tall, whatever." But he was specifically focused on lining them up and making it aesthetic. Their setbacks, they're going to be evenly apart. They're going to be at the same point on the street, and we're going to have all these vendors from the community. And there's a guy who sold tamales. He has a store now, right? 10 years later, and he has had for some years. Somebody selling books, somebody selling whatever, right? So it's a incubator for small businesses and people who want to be entrepreneurs, starting with $20 rent for a Sunday event instead of a year or more lease that maybe they won't, the data shows that most of them go out of business. So starting at a scale that people can succeed at, now he's taken some of those people, he's leased them, he's sold them live work units, he sold them office space, he sold them retail, right? And so he is incubating this ecosystem of interesting people doing cool stuff and helping them monetize it and turn it into a business. And what Ken was saying earlier, now he's buying defunct shopping center space and he's subdividing it internally and doing micro leases. Because guess what? 20 he gets way more per square foot than someone would renting it to one tenant. My wife, she's an entrepreneur. We're huge fans of this co-warehousing space, right? So you'll see people buy an old Office Depot and then break it up into 100 units with office furniture, partition walls and things, right? And then that allows small businesses to buy just enough space to store their wares because they're an online retailer. That's us, right? That's hugely valuable for the community. It's lucrative for the operator because they're getting more per square foot and they're less dependent on one tenant. Monty's doing that in Duncanville today, right? Not with a co-warehousing space, but hey, can I get 20 businesses in this one building as subtenants, right? There's a project called um, man, I'm forgetting it now. There's another project that's an old warehouse, kind of industrial building in Dallas, uh, that has like 20 or 30 uses in one building. It was a huge zoning challenge, but it's a really cool development that took a historical or aged building and converted it into an opportunity for 20 or 30 different businesses to have a presence, right? And so um, those are exciting ways to build the community and the people who occupy the space that we developed, and they both need each other. We can't build buildings without somebody to lease it or buy it, and those people need space. They need a storefront. So that's really cool stuff going on up here in DFW anyway.
Yeah, one other question on this, just because I'm curious about it. Does the growing interest in walkability surprise you guys? Like when you think about, well, here, let me explain why I say that. When you think about how disconnected in the real world we feel as a society, like we're very connected on the internet, right? We're very connected on social media, but in the real world, it feels like we've been growing further and further apart. And so when I hear about walkability, it usually means, and maybe I'm not understanding this right, but it usually means the communities are going to be more tight knit, right? It's going to be, things are going to be closer together. And that's why I wonder, it surprises me sometimes when I hear that there's such an interest in it, but maybe it's just that people are craving that connectivity that they haven't had in the real world. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's the oldest thing to our nature, right? I mean, we grew up in dense environments. As soon as cities were built, they were not built like they're built today because we didn't have cars and we couldn't cheaply build miles of highway. And so people were dense. Look at every most popular tourist destination, incredibly dense. There's so much life all around. There's a grocery store, there's a jewelry shop, there's a hat store, there's a cafe, there's another cafe, there's another cafe. There's so much stuff. It's interesting. We like to be engaged and interested, right? So it's no surprise at all to me. The reason it's a phenomenon here is because we are a country developed after the advent of the automobile and highways. Our development was designed to serve another end, And so we love to go to these places that now are unaffordable to 99.9% of the world because everybody wants to be in New York City and Manhattan. They want to be in Paris. They want to be in London. They want to be in Barcelona. They want to be in these places that are the model of walkable places, right? It's just, it's more interesting. So to me, it's not a surprise. That's why I want to make sure that the conversation we're having is received as intended by the people with the power to develop. Because if they're hearing all this interest and we just get more walking trails from my house to looping back to my house with nothing on the way, that's not what we're talking about here. So, but everybody's interested. I just saw something from the World Health Organization um, pushed out specifically about bikeability and walkability today on LinkedIn. So this is now a global conversation, which probably only applies to newly developing countries like us, because the old ones, it's already part of their way of living.
I think you made one excellent point. You made a number, but the thing that sticks with me, Jack, is walkability needs to be paired with bikeability. We're a platinum level. Our city is a platinum level, one of only 4 or 5 in the United States. And it's because every decision the city makes, they think about bicycles. Every single decision they make, bicycles are at the core of that decision. And we have the unusual situation where, for the first time, I'm in a place where if you develop retail, they tell you to get rid of parking spaces. So, oh, you got too many parking spaces. You need to have more bike racks because we want to encourage people to bike to this center. We don't want them to bring their cars. It's a little short-sighted in an area that gets as much snow as we have, but you got to love a city that's got that at their core. If you focus on bikes, the walkability is pretty easy. So we and Jack, you're hitting so close to home. I just looked at my wife's vehicle, which is 7 years old. She does all the local traveling. She averages 3,000 miles a year. How could you get away in Dallas with only traveling 3,000 miles a year, going to the drugstore, going to your doctor, going to the grocery store, going to the coffee shop? And it's because we live in an area that has walkability and bikeability, and everything is in close proximity. And I would tell you that our stress level is way lower than anybody else that lives in a comparable environment that doesn't have walkability and bikeability. Our expenses are way lower because if you look at the real cost of owning and driving an automobile per mile, it's high. People don't, they just get in their cars and drive, and they don't realize every mile is, you know, they drive 10 miles, they drop $5, 6, $7. They just don't think about it because people don't do the math on their traveling around everyday chores. So yeah, I would just add bikeability. I think you're dead on though. It's more and more important because our lives are so much more stressful, and our time is cut into smaller and smaller and smaller increments available to just enjoy life. And I think most of us now are starting to focus more on enjoying life. So it all goes together.
Look, I know we're getting, this is a long one,
This
Ryan.
this is a record. I hope people are still listening.
Let me say one more thing. Just if anybody's interested in case studies, right? Bikeability, when I lived in Portland, Oregon, I saw an amazing kind of retrofit solution to that. And when I lived there for about a year, I didn't have a car. I sold my car to finance my move. And so I had a bicycle. I lived in the southwest quadrant. I worked in the southeast. So I was going across um, the Willamette. You know, that city has done a tremendous job at making it safe to be a cyclist. When I've been a cyclist in Texas, I have trucks try to blow smoke in my face and run me off the road. Not fun, right? But in Portland, what they did, and you can do this with the infamous gridded streets that everybody today hates for some reason. They're amazing because they connect everything. there is no dead end. Everything is connected. And what they're able to do is take these a gridded street, residential streets in the Alphabet District. People can look at that. I think it's in Northwest Corridor. Um, every alternating street was in opposite direction. So it's one-way streets, 2 lanes. The right lane was bicycle priority lane. If there's a bike in it, the car behind you has to wait. And also, finally, the speed limit was 20 miles an hour, not 30. Look at the data. That's a huge difference in fatality likelihood from an accident. And so, what they did is they made it safe and possible for people to ride bikes to places they needed to get to. And there's tons of people on bikes there. And so, you don't have to come up with some new crazy system. You can take your existing street, take some traffic paint, some signage, and change speed limits. And then the only missing ingredient is there anywhere to bike to? Can I get to my job or the store or wherever? Um, but I think those solutions are there, and you don't have to do anything expensive to make things
It's a good
to
point.
create more
Really
opportunities
good.
for different transportation.
It's a really good point.
So
Yep. Well, I do think at about an hour and 15 minutes here, we probably better wrap up.
it's a long one. Yeah.
Let's maybe before we officially close out here, just any final thoughts from either of you before we close out. Ken, you want to go first?
I really, um, I, I, I just want to emphasize, if you have an opportunity to help someone else grow, take it. It's the best thing you'll do in your career. It will leave a lasting legacy. That's it. I know we're running long. Jack?
Jack, how about you?
Oh no, I mean I'm just happy to be here and love talking to you guys, and hopefully somebody out there finds it halfway interesting what we talked about. Otherwise, I'm just going to be thinking about the next time we can hop on here.
Heck yeah. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for coming on here and having this long conversation about topics that I know people will be interested in. And for those of you listening in, thanks for tuning in as always. And if you're not already subscribed, please click that button. We'd love to have you back for the next one. Otherwise, we will talk to you all next week.
Thank you, Ryan. Good job.